welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and rolling. And welcome to session 3, which is about blue and green infrastructure. Let's see, we have an expert panel here. And also everything about the topic. So welcome panel members, planning and building, Freiwasser and Symposium. And our presenters today are starting with there you are, sorry. Followed by Jess. And then we have Stu one.
He's online.
He's online, yeah.
And Introduce online.
Introduce online as well. Okay, so welcome both of you online right now. And I will say start already. So, all right.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start with this one. What would you do if you came back home and realized that your house was leaking? You would probably be like her, running around to buy a bucket. First, you may grab something that close to hand, that easily to carry. But what if the rain getting heavier and this bucket is not sufficient? You would probably need a bigger bucket for this. Let's have a look at other buckets in the house. One is a big old bucket. It's large enough, but it's a bit too heavy to carry. Next to this is a small plastic bucket. It's easier to carry, but not large enough to contain the water. Another one is a rusty metal bucket. It has a perfect size, but it's a bit too old. It probably couldn't hold water at all. This situation is happening in coastal cities like Christchurch. With climate change, now we realize that rainfall will be heavier and more frequently. Some cities, including Christchurch, have managed to have a green stormwater infrastructure work as a bucket to store excess runoff volumes. But however, this facility is limited to a few areas on public land. Clearly, their capacity is not adequate to handle the greater impact of climate change. Here's an example of Heathcote catchment. That is the maximum capacity of current drainage system in the Heathcote river catchment. If the future climate follow the minor climate change scenario, the catchment runoff volume will increase by 6% within the mid of this century and will remain steady after this point. However, under the major climate change scenario, it would reach 8% by the mid of this century and continue to rise up to 25% by the end of this century. And here is the projection of moderate climate change scenario. The municipality have to manage these excess runoff volumes. The greater impact of climate change, as you can see, the larger stormwater storage is required. We desperately need to have more green stormwater infrastructure on private land, because we don't have enough public land to implement green infrastructure. 2 years ago, I presented the potential of industrial land to provide supplementary city flood mitigation in this conference. The finding of citywide assessment indicate industrial land in Charlesworth and the Heathcote catchment has substantial capability to reduce catchment runoff volume by up to 30%. This is mean that they can provide flood mitigation for the long term. However, there are variations of industrial land capability in the Heathcote catchment. This indicates that there are many types of buckets in the heat catchment. To achieve the effective flood mitigation planning, strategically collecting the right bucket is necessary. We don't need all of these buckets right now. We just need the right bucket located in the right place at the right time. So you may have heard that putting the right person in the right job at the right time is very important to achieve the best outcome. Therefore, is understanding the personality of each person is essential to ensure that the recruited people is matched with the job and they can get it done in the most effective way. So here is Myers-Briggs type indicator. It is a most popular system to determine personality types. Has anyone done this test before? Yeah. Okay, that. Yeah. This personality test based on 4 main questions, resulting in 16 personality types. If some of you find out that I am a weirdo, you are right, because I am INFJ, the rare personality, according to the Myers-Briggs Foundation, the information that's available in Myers-Briggs Foundation website. Having this personality really support me on what I'm doing in my PhD research. It's quite challenging, but I do enjoy doing this. I would recommend some PhD students and they online to do this test before you submit your proposal. But
Yeah.
should have a match personality, actually. Anyway, I'm not going to talking about personality types today, but this is a good example of successful classification system that can help to select the good people for the right job. It was used by the Office of Strategic Service to match operating with the secret mission during the World War II. But actually, this system developed by mother and daughter named Myers-Briggs. They developed this one to help women entering into the industrial workforce during World War II because a lot of men went out to the battlefield. Yeah. So how about, let's get back to flood mitigation planning. How can we put the right buckets in the right place at the right time? So, and I want to say that as far as I know, there was no effective methodology to describing the characteristics of land to mitigate flood mitigation in the times of climate change. So I have developed a planning to assess the potential of industrial land for supplementary civil flood mitigation. So today I'm proud to present our novel methodology named HLCA+C, which stands for Hydrogen-Based Land Capability Assessment and Classification. The methodology has been recently published alongside with its application in a separate paper. It consists of 4 main steps. The first step is to cluster the private property into a storm water management zone to establish the unit of analysis. which this unit present the represent the similar potential of land to flood mitigation. And the second step is to quantify the collectible runoff volume, which is determined based on the independent variables of total runoff volume that flow through the zone and the capacity of in-ground storage. The third step is to evaluate the extent to which the required amount of catchment runoff reduction required to store in each zone. Lastly, all the assessment from the previous step is used to classify stormwater management zones into 18 types. And the classification is based on two main questions. The first question is to assess the capacity of land to offset the climate change induced flooding. Here is the scale indicating catchment runoff volumes that require to mitigate climate change impact that associate to different climate change and different time periods. The first class is the highest capability level, which is capable of mitigating climate change impact under the major climate change scenario up to the end of the century. From here, the higher class number indicate decreasing capability with respect to ability to reduce flooding in different scenarios and different time periods. Class 5 and Class 6 is not capable to mitigate any climate change induced flooding, but a few of zones that locate in Class 5 maybe can work together in order to achieve the same degree of flood mitigation as Class 4. Another question that I use to classify the land is about what is the key factor limiting the flood mitigation capability level of each zone. Flood mitigation capability level is determined based on three main factors, including the size of drainage area, indicating the amount of water that flow into the zone, the depth to groundwater, and the amount of potential green infrastructure area defining the size of the bucket. The zone having the size of drainage area as a limiting factor will have the large storage capacity. The storage capacity is larger than the amount of water that's falling into the bucket. But if the size of the bucket, the limiting factor could be either the depth and the width of the bucket. The high groundwater level could be identified as a limiting key factor if that zone have depth from surface to the high depth to groundwater less than 2 meters. If not, the potential area will be a limiting factor. Knowing the flood mitigation capability levels and the key limiting factors can help to identify implementation approach that can be rolled out at the right time to provide optimum flood mitigation when it needs it. The most easiest approach that can be implemented immediately in the developed land is retrofit approach. Yeah, it involves implementation without significantly changing existing land use. The second approach is retrofit and transfer. This approach can be used only on a zone that having kind of designated area as a limiting factor because this zone has exceeds in-ground storage capacity, so its capability can be further enhanced to beyond what is estimated if they are decided to receive storm water and transfer from other zones. Relocation is the third approach, involving moving all the existing building and infrastructure and moving land use elsewhere. This approach particularly attractive for the zone that having shallow water table and prone to flooding. And this approach could be rolled out under the major climate change in long term. The last approach is redesign. This approach requires a significant change in the existing use, and it means that the building and road layout need to be changed if appropriate for the zone having the amount of potential area as a limiting factors. And it might be practical to implement in the midterm to long term when flood mitigation capability is needed. Here is the result of classifying 20 industrial zones in the Hitchcock catchment. Among these, 6 industrial zones is prioritized to develop green stormwater infrastructure network. The implementation on these zones can be orchestrated 2 times when climate change impact evolve using different approaches that I've shown you in the previous slide. If the infrastructure network implemented through this pathway, it could mitigate flooding up to the end, like just shy of the major climate change scenario up to the end of this century. Get back to the leaking house. Using my methodology, the small plastic bucket will be chosen first to holding the water for a little while. This could buy some time while the bigger old bucket is being moved to the right place and while the metal bucket is being fitted. This is just a matter of putting the right bucket in the right place and the right time. Just buck it up. Water. Yeah, thank you for your attention, and I would like to take this chance to thank you to all of my supervisors, Wendy and Jules, and another one, Professor Dr. Jean Litt, for raising me up. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. And I'm going to begin. I'm Jess. I started my PhD a while ago in New Holland for various reasons. And Jackie, who my assistant organised before the more. Probably by saying, hey, maybe you should go to the symposium or the way to think about your research and getting back into things. So here we are thinking about revisiting my PhD and launching back into it. Why am I relaunching? Partly because it was a little guy, partly because of other family dramas. My life has been reorganised, and it's time to kind of reorganise my thinking. So part of this is a little bit of a retrospective thinking about where I've been and supposing like what I've been up to, thinking about what I'm going to do. And really think about what I'm going to do, where I want my PhD to go, and in particular, now that teaching is over at the end of the summer, what do I want to do this summer? So, design experiments, doing field work for my PhD, and thinking about how I get there. So, because like substitution, we love taxonomies, we love classification. I am an INTP, so I don't like deadlines, I like flexibility, I like thinking, I like delving off regular trails and things. So hence, my whole PhD is about this. Really thinking about goals. I love taxonomies. In the previous life, when I was doing my science, I was a geomorphologist. I did geotech, so soil taxonomy and rock classification, water hydrology classification. If there was a detail or a meaning to something, I had to know how to do it. But now, landscape architecture, new GIS, different focus. Really, my PhD has been about thinking about this idea of does landscape have a voice? But as landscape architects, we look at spaces, we read landscapes, we talk about them, we communicate them, we have our own language, we don't have a to define. We talk to them, they're just like, we talk a new language. When we design, we're reading from design spaces, we're creating spaces ourselves, we're creating new things. So I'm really interested in the language of landscape, how we actually communicate our designs, how we design and how to improve those things. And so previously, I was looking at some of the design spaces around the central city, in particular around the Avon, looking at some of the design work that had been done, looking at how it can be described. So things like LA, design work, sensitive languages, the metaphors, the cliches, the tropes used in sort of common language. Looking at a semiotics of landscape, how we actually talk about it as a design and how does it influence our work, taxonomies, maybe not necessarily reference, but I came across this in a design website. I thought it's actually a fantastic example of taxonomy. They go all over the place sometimes. Titles and terms and reasons why we classify things. And I'm sort of looking at this, thinking about landscape and how we actually define. So far I've done quite an extensive. I get very distracted by papers. I love reading into theories and seeing what people are up to. So it's quite extensive. Most of it has been focused on ways of reading and understanding science. So for me, key questions: how do we design? Does it actually matter? So the different arguments about should landscapes mean, does it actually matter if they mean, and who do they mean to? But for me, meaning actually doesn't matter. The objects, materials, places, science that we design and live in every day have meanings. So if you get into anthropology or ethnography, you start to see things like object associations. In this case, just taking up a little paper from the International Journal of Design, looking at everyday objects and what they might mean to people. And you can see, I might look at that little hedgehog and be going, oh, that's not like. But until you own it, they got it in Venice, things this, connection with smell, with moments of time, with family association. Maybe it's a birthday, maybe it's a gift that they were given. We can't tell what an object means just by looking at it. We can make assumptions. As a scientist, I might say, oh, okay, it's silver, and this metal, and this form. But there's a whole lot of things that we associate that come from our history, that come from our learning, that come from personal experience, from corporate and personal identities. So the way we read, the way we understand landscape matters, there's lots of theory. And I can go into a whole list of theory coming from Daniel Simon, and 5 textbook on design theory and how we understand design and design process. But in this case, I'm going to look at one particular theorist, does the main work. And understand about viewpoints, how we actually look at sites. In particular, I'm really interested in design critique, actually looking at the work that we do, thinking about the way that we do it. So critiquing viewpoints, so not just going, oh, I can look at this place, exactly it is, but looking critically at some of those viewpoints, at objects and sites, and thinking about how I would explore those places. So probably wondering why I'm looking at the structure. Blue green. I am looking at the river, it's a piece of infrastructure. So how do I look at the river? How do I look at the infrastructure, at the objects that are found there, the place itself? But we're particularly using an experimental and exploratory design process. So I'm a design experiment. I want to spend summer with a range of experiments. That design is messy, very well aware of that. Lots of ways we can look at landscape, lots of different methods. For me, because I'm wanting to understand the way landscape architects approach space, the way landscape might be given a voice, I want to look at a range of different methods. I know as designers, there's a range of different reasons that we do what we do. It might be for a commercial project, we might have limited time, we might have limited funds, we might be working maybe for what they can responsible design. So thinking about the community, thinking about landscape architects, I like to take a steward for the landscape, actually look out the landscape and the people that are in it. It might drive the designs. Other designers design pure experimentation. So we might be trying to provoke people, we might be trying to get people to think things, we might be trying to provoke discussion. And my experiments are going to sit in that category, thinking more about experimentation and discussion. What I'm curious at, looking at the way that we actually prompt forward, thinking about the way that we look at spaces, the way we actually look. This image on the right is from Down Ravi. So here we have some technical design. So they've designed a lot of industrial objects and they have some really kind of weird things like they designed, in this case, their forages. So thinking about, designing for an overpopulated planet. So in 100 years' time, we have to become more animals to actually forage and eat sticks and multiple things. How can biology actually help us? And if you look at this link, I encourage you to do so. Have a little Google forages 2009, and we've got some fantastic videos that really get you thinking about things. So I'm looking at design as something that's cumulative, that interrogates how we do things, that gets people thinking, that speculates, that involves design fiction. So thinking not just about the objects that we find in a place, but what they might be and how we might design. I have a framework, as I mentioned, which kind of mimics 10 ways of seeing. So think about what I'm doing, looking at perspectives for viewing landscape architecture, critiquing those. So as part of this, I need a framework using my next 10 visions, like this whole way of looking at landscape. And as part of that, I've come up with a particular sort of approach. Now, obviously, this is going to come out of common practice and methodology, which is interesting the way not just I look at landscape, but the landscape architect, other common practices. So, firstly, I'll have these 10 versions. So, I don't know how many are familiar with the paper, but as part of this paper, it came out in 1979, so older than the group. But a really good paper, it's in quite a benchmark, but we might look at landscape. So concerned with the social cultural landscape, as much as infrastructure perspectives that people use to look at it. So this is my first stepping stone. And from there, I need to have a series of methods. When I was reading sort of through this paper, some really sort of key prompting thoughts that came out of it. But it wasn't anything that's really explicit as to how we actually look at the landscape. So I've gone back to looking at my literature review and looking at all the different things I came across. How there's a whole list of different things and it's all that. But through all my readings, there's been distinct processes, distinct methods, distinct outputs. I'm interested in design, communication, and products that we produce as much as the way we actually look at the land. And there's a whole lot of different theories in terms of forming how we think about landscape, how we think about ourselves. But all these things, as designers, we go out, we don't look at the site like slate than our brains or what we're looking at. So this is my background, my thinking, and also paired with verbs and that. So again, a really great structure for the way that we think about things. So the idea that we have actors, we have stages, we have everything influencing. So I'm going to use this the idea that if I throw Phoenix viewpoints as a starting point, they're going to become my theme. So it might be a theme of nature. I'm going to look at the actor. So thinking about, let's say I'm considering looking at the river. That's my stage, it's my background, it's unifying theme between all my experience. I've got a community viewpoint, and then I've got my design integration that are going to influence the outcome. So we kind of have this, I guess, the pentad of influences, and which is going to drive the experiments. I'll do an example. So first example, nature. Nature would personify this powerful thing that should be without man. So man is taken out of the equation. What would happen if the river actually, and seen as a person, actually had its own voice, its own autonomy, that as human we could control it? What would happen? If we're looking at nature through this lens, and then we're designing, we want to design a river. I'm going to focus on the red side of the wild space, this kind of space right now. It's gone through a phase where the house has been removed and now it's open space. So if I think about the river, in this case, being the protagonist, the voice, the driver, if the river becomes center stage, if the river gets a voice, what sort of designs might come out? And thinking about the river as being creative design. How do we give a river a voice? How do we actually design for it? If I think about the fact that we have water and not water, we have river and not land, we kind of have a bigger ground. So thinking about the binary contrast of water and not water. So producing a map or a transcript of the river design, what the place actually become. Coming up with the manuscript, the dictionary, how do I translate the river? Somehow, obviously, it's a little sample of what I produce. So you're experimenting to see what's going to happen. But thinking about, if I'm providing the river with a voice and thinking about that physical hydrology, that space in time and place, what might result in terms of maybe the map, maybe the language of the river, and for river structure. I don't know how many of you live in Merthyr. Here we have again. So 1974, in the 70s, we have this fantastic artist, and she designed works that included this. She produced newsletters, she produced journal articles, she did a fake article for the New York Times, and language. All of the works were reverses. She used figures, in this case, very smutty ink. So you can see it's going to be very experimental, but this framework of thinking about, we have these drivers, we might be looking at the river, we have different perspectives of how we might explore the place, and it's fun, probably get a little abstract, but things like how we use scales, how we use an orthodox process. So those of you who know, we now have a fantastic guide for landscape assessment guidelines. So a list of rules to help us assess the landscape. So I took the hands on this and actually said, okay, I've got this now. Like my pattern. So looking at orthodox views, looking at unorthodox views. The whole point is to get me looking at the river in different ways, through different lenses, and think about things. If I imagine that I am a white man in the river and I'm looking for a piece of real estate, then I'm going to look at the river in different ways. So it might seem a bit random, a bit abstract, and it's deliberately so. I sometimes wonder why the category is such a name, because I'm far from orthodox. But the whole point of these experiments is to get me looking at the river in different ways and thinking about how we might look at the river, and how other people might look at the river. And this is complete. This is why someone I should really do a seminar and actually explain what I've done after so much.
All right, for the next two presentations, we have students who are very far away. We're going to start with Yu, who's in China. Yu, are you here? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
Great, good to have you with us. So if you can share your screen.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Ziyu and I'm currently offshore. Before I start, I want to take this opportunity to thank my supervisor Jill and Nada for their help, supervisions, and support. Today, I'm going to talk about how people use blue space when they live in high-density communities. Just like this image shows, there are lots of different type of high-density communities located along a Chinese river. So basically, my presentation will divide it into 4 parts: research problem, lecture review, method, and results so far. So let's talk about the green and blue spaces in China. So top 3 photo actually shows the current community green space in China. No matter people live in the community with no green space, just like the left photo shows, or they live in a better environment community, just like the second and the third photo shows. They all choose sit on their own chair and they don't prefer to sit on their public bench in the communities. So this let me think about what's the reason behind they do this specific activities in particular ways. And actually, we do not know enough about people's preference when they choose to be here. And in terms of the blue space in China, just like the bottom 2 photo shows, the left photo it shows a public urban park in the city, and there are lots of exercise equipment. However, no one uses it. They all prefer to go to the running along the river, and here is a children play area not far away. So this let me think about whether our current design actually meets people's needs, and what is people's preference between urban green space and urban blue space. So basically, my research aim is to improve blue and green spaces in high-density cities to better adapt people's preference and usage requirements in high-density city in China. And my first research objective is that to describe connection between high-density communities and riverside green space in a coastal Chinese city. And the second one is to identify performance pattern and relationship of residents' usage of community green space and blue green space along an urban river. And the third one is to explore the reasons for why people do specific activities in particular ways. The reason why we need to study now is that the COVID outbreak has totally changed people's life, and the Sustainable Development Goals 11 by the United Nations giving us that creating public space is one of the measures to make cities sustainable. What is more, government policy and travel restrictions made us rely much more on our surrounding living environment. And the next part is my lecture review. So the theory concept I will be used in my research is blue-green infrastructure. I will focus on the green infrastructure and blue infrastructure separately in a Chinese local context, and then bring them together. My research will hopefully contribute new knowledge to the blue-green infrastructure in China and better define blue-green spaces in the Chinese context. What is more, there is still a geographical variation in the definition of high-density communities in the current lecture, and further research is needed on the different types of communities in high-density cities. In terms of different density communities in China, currently we use the floor area ratio to classify the different types of communities. And currently we got high-rise residential buildings, middle-rise residential buildings, and detached houses in Chinese city. And for the communities over different periods in China, currently we have two types. One is older communities, which is built in 1980s to 1990s. This type of community actually developed by the public sector, and the environment actually lack of public facilities and green spaces. Another type, we call it commercial housing, which is built after 1998. This type is developed by the proprietary developers, and the environment of this type community is better than older communities. So although we know these two types, but there is still limited understanding of quality and spatial layout of green space in the current older and commercial high-density communities in China. For green space in the communities in China, some Chinese researchers point out that Chinese urban planners tend to focus on the quantity of green space at the expense of racial layout. What is more, Western research also point out that we should pay attention on the impact of landscape character, aesthetic quality, and the different options for people. So the quality and layout of green space between different high-density communities deserves attention. And blue and green spaces provide safe, accessible, and attractive recreation area for exercise. Just like the left photo shows, we can do some both individual activities and group activities in the urban blue and green spaces. However, residents' motivations for undertaking specific activities, in particular green and blue spaces, is largely unknown in a Chinese context. And the left graph actually shows the different reasons why people go to the urban natural environment in Guangzhou, Hong Kong, and Amsterdam. However, whether other elements affect residents' use of blue and green space in China needs to be investigated, such as biodiversity and different plants and so on. So based on these research gaps, my research question is that the first one is, what is the current spatial layout and quality of green space in high-density communities and blue-green spaces along a Chinese river? The second one is that what are and why do residents have preference for regular activities in high-density residential green space and blue-green space along a Chinese river? The last one is what particular elements affect this preference for green and blue spaces? And then it's about the site selection. Qingdao is selected as the study area based on the two reasons. One is that Qingdao is one of the top 10 very large-sized cities in China in last year. And another reason is that Qingdao is also one of the 10 cities in China with the highest ranking of green space per capita. What is more, current research about blue and green space infrastructure in China is mainly focused on Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. Qingdao is selected as the study area in this work to address the research gaps regarding blue and green spaces in large, fast-growing cities outside the three supersized cities in China. During 224 waterways in Qingdao, Licun River is selected as the study area, as it is the largest water system in the urban area of Qingdao, and it also flows through more high-density communities than any other river in the city. So in terms of the Licun River's history, here is a historical market. We call it Licun Market, located in the river bank with more than 140 years history. However, this market is actually badly affected by the flooding water, just like the left bottom photo shows. And after the flooding, the water is badly polluted. So in the 2017, the government decided to start renewal project of this river, and we can see the current environment through the left bottom photo. Because the environment becomes better, so more residents come here. So currently there are both older communities and some new commercial housing located along the Licun River. And this page is about my research design. So basically, my research will decided to 3 stages. First stage is field observation. The aim of this is to understand green space distribution of different communities and the riverside. The second stage is interview by the riverside. The aim of it is to collect river users' route maps and talk data to understand people's activities, relationship patterns. The last stage is interview in the community green space. The aim of it is to understand most important reasons why people do different activities in different areas. And the last part is my results so far. So firstly, it's about the different community types along the riverside. Currently, we have 5 different community types. As we can see from the left map, the parallel pattern are mainly gathering in the lower reaches from the section 12 to section 17. And the central pattern and the Scotic pattern are mainly located in the upper reaches from the section 1 to section 11. And this diagram illustrates the different subtypes of parallel pattern. So first subtype is the buildings is parallel to each other with no green space. And the second one is that the green space and the storage room is parallel to the buildings, just like the red photo shows. This is the storage room and the path is very narrow. The third subtype is that the green space is simple parallel to the residential building. The last subtype is that the green space is parallel to the buildings, and there is a small square in the corner of the communities. However, things becomes very different for the Scarted pattern. For Scarted pattern, the residential buildings is located in the well-designed garden, just like the red photo shows. The path is wider and the green space is much more. And basically, I divided my participants in 2 groups. One is I interviewed by the riverside. Another group is I interviewed in the community green space. So we can see from the diagram that most people are come from the Scarted pattern communities. For the people I interviewed in by the riverside, 2 people live in the communities which is built before 1998, and most people are live in the commercial housing communities which is built after 1998, and most people are live very close to the riverside. In terms of the community activities of people I interviewed in the community green space, leisure working is the most important activities for them. If all 13 participants give leisure working 10 out of 10, then that would be a maximum score of 300. So during the 13 participants, 28 people do leisure working activities. And for the reason why they do activities in the community green space, most people said the most important reason is that for relaxation. And the left map shows the 5 to 15 minutes work distance from the river. And for the reasons why people prefer the riverside, the most important reason is that there are weather vision along the riverside. And during the 13 participants I interviewed in the community green space, 25 people also do activities in the river, along the river. And what is interesting is that the leisure working is still the most important activities. For the activities I interviewed along the riverside, the most important activity is still leisure working. What is more interesting is that for people I interviewed along the riverside, they have much more social activities, such as catch the fish with kids, have a talk with others. And for the reason why the people I interviewed by the riverside prefer the river green space, most people think the most important reason is that when they go to the riverside, they have larger activity space than community green space. For this page is about the people's performance of different river sections. For people I interviewed by the riverside, Section 8 is most popular river sections. And what is interesting that for the people I interviewed in the communities, they also think the Section 8 is the most popular river sections. We can see from the left bottom photo, Section 8 got a huge children's slide and a very huge meadow for people to have a picnic. So people can do a lot of motivated activities in Section 8. Currently, I'm still looking for the participants from Section 1 to Section 3, so the result will update in the future. And here is the important elements for people interviewed both along the riverside and in the communities. So firstly, for people I interviewed along the riverside, during 30 people, 29 people said they see water birds, and the 27 people said if they can see more water birds, they will go to the riverside much more than before. And 27 people said the mosquito discouraged them to go to the riverside. 23 people said if there are more lotus flowers, they will also prefer to go to the riverside. Lotus flower actually has special meaning in Chinese culture, so it is a very common water plant in Chinese river or lake. And 21 people said better lighting in the night also attracts them. And 18 people said more fish will also attract them. And 9 people said if they can live closer to the riverside, they will also prefer to go to the riverside than before. And for the people I interviewed in the communities, 23 people said mosquitoes also discourage them to go to the riverside. And 23 people said seeing more water birds also attract them. However, during the 30 people, only 16 people said they see the water birds when they go to the riverside. And this one is about the COVID influence. For the people I interviewed by the riverside, most people think after COVID-19 outbreak, they spend more time to visit natural environments. However, for the people I interviewed in the communities, most people said there is no change after the COVID outbreak for their routine to visit natural environment. So currently, I'm still in the data collection stage, and hopefully, I can got much more interesting results in the future. Yes, that's all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Zhu.
Thank
Inderjit.
you.
So Inderjit is in India.
Thank you, Nada. Hello, everyone. Let me just share my screen first. Hello, everyone. My name is Inderjit Bharat. I'm currently studying offshore in India. The topic of my research is nurturing water citizenship to create self-sufficient communities. My supervisors are Jill and Nada, to whom I'm always grateful for their guidance and support. Moving on to the presentation, my thesis has been divided into 3 stages, of which stage 1 is complete. And I'm currently working, we're almost finishing the stage 2, which is data collection and data interpretation. Third stage, data analysis, is yet to start. Starting with the research problem, water management is a major concern globally, which is being exacerbated by climate change and growing populations. This graph here clearly shows how the water withdrawals and water consumption, along with the population, have risen steeply since 1990. Urban water management systems comprise of water supply, drainage, and treatment, and they are key to adapting to climate change and achieving self-sufficient cities. However, these systems are predominantly centralized and network-based. Many researchers in the past have questioned the sustainability of these systems, as cities are struggling to shift from conventional centralized approaches to sustainable solutions that involve the citizens. So they learn to adopt the water sensitive behavior. There are various factors that impact the water provisioning and management systems, specifically in South Asian cities. The most affected are the marginalized population in informal settlements, where water and sanitation services are abysmal. This often leads to emergence of other infrastructure practices that households engage in. Hence, the water management challenge that many Asian cities need to address is how to transform cities to sustainable urban cities while addressing infrastructure deficits and engaging the citizens in the process. This study explores water management in informal settlements in an Indian city. Looking at the context of this problem, ensuring equitable access to and sustainable management of water and its resources are important aspects of SDG Target 6.1. The New Urban Agenda of 2017 further commits to transition towards resilient cities and human settlements. To gain an understanding of the existing research in the field, literature review was undertaken of a water citizenship concept, sustainable water management, and informal settlements. Although for water citizenship, very limited literature is available on this concept, but it has often been linked to rights of people by various authors. Coming to sustainable management, it's been defined as meeting current demand for all water users without impairing future supply. Past studies have shown that steering towards sustainability requires household level initiatives as well as effective governance. Despite significant advancements, on-ground implementation of sustainable urban water management techniques and processes limited. Informal settlements are global urban phenomenon which exists in urban areas in various forms and typologies. Some of its characteristics include substandard housing, lack of basic services, overcrowded areas, insecure tenure, and unhealthy living conditions. A review of the 3 main indicators of water service delivery were also conducted, which is access to water, quality of water, and quantity. I will not go into detail, but I'm doing some research on water cleaning solutions, other interventions in this field globally, and wastewater treatment to support my research. So based on the research problem, and literature read so far, we've seen what the problems are. However, what we don't know about the problem is what are the various communities of water practices that exist in informal settlements. It could be how they collect water or use water, or their knowledge and actions on water conservation or availability of water and the like. Second point that comes out of sustainable water management is the identification of barriers and enablers at various levels. These barriers or enablers could be at household community level, like what is restricting them from conserving water, or what is facilitating a good practice which they might be following. These barriers and enablers could also be at government level. Although government is not a focus of this project, it is important to include some research from officials or from government water department to collect context information about planning, management, and maintenance of infrastructure, and to know their side of story about any hurdles they face to implement sustainable water practices. Third point is the daily water use practices of households, on which very limited research is available currently. So based on this literature review, my research aim is to investigate the sustainable water management of slum dwelling households where water practices depend on the infrastructure available. And the research questions which are linked to my research objectives are: how do households in informal settlements collect and use water on daily basis? Number two, to what extent are communities implementing sustainable water practices? Number three, what are the barriers and enablers to sustainable water management in households and communities? This project will use inductive research strategy, which starts with data collection and then moving on to identifying patterns before deriving theories. In this study, inductive strategy involves looking at water practices, which are social practices on ground, and then categorizing them using certain criteria in relation to local water management practices, then proceeding to develop theories. There are two areas of theory for this project. One is the substantive theory, which is water citizenship, which is about rights of people to have access to safe water and how they own it or conserve it. Second is the theory of social practices, which is the methodological theory. Social practices are activities performed for social reasons. If we make a comparison between cities of global north and global south, in global north, social practices do not intersect with the infrastructure as it is often invisible. Whereas in global south, infrastructure exists in delimited geographical areas, which compel people to depend on alternate low technologies for water supply. So as Chauvin Walker explained, these practices are of ordinary people, are enacted by ordinary people. So they are essential component of transitioning to water sensitive futures. Data collection methods are divided into 4 stages. Stage 1 is the site selection. Stage 2, site visit for selecting few settlements for pilot study. Stage 3 is conducting interviews with households in selected settlements and preliminary findings. And stage 4 is selection of a particular settlement for in-depth study. The picture on the left, site selected for this project is in northern state of India called Uttar Pradesh, which lies in a region with the most productive groundwater in the country. Agra, which is one of the main cities of Uttar Pradesh, is the city that is being chosen for general study area. It is the reasons for choosing Agra is that it is densely populated with over 30% population living in informal settlements. Second, Agra is unable to meet demand of safe water. And third, the Municipal Corporation of Agra has been working towards improving the water and sanitation services in various settlements. The city of Agra, which is the second diagram, it is divided into 4 zones, of which Tajganj has been selected for more specific study. Reasons are, one, water is a major challenge here. Second, contaminated groundwater is affecting the health of local people. Third, a contact has already been established with the NGO working in Tajganj, which can provide good access to the community. There are 23 informal settlements within Tajganj. And four, more settlements in Tajganj. There are more settlements in Tajganj compared to other zones, and no literature was available online regarding other zones. So stage 2 was to visit the site, Tajganj, and select few settlements for a pilot study. A pilot study, as Ian explains, helps in refining data collection plans with respect to both the content of data and procedures to be followed. In this research, pilot study was used to select a particular settlement for detailed study and refine the interview questions. After consulting and discussing with the local NGO, which is CURE, Center for Urban and Regional Excellence, 4 settlements were visited based on a broad criterion. Settlements receiving municipal supply of water, settlements which are not receiving municipal supply and are relying on alternate sources of water, and settlements where CURE had installed rainwater harvesting systems for the community. Following data was collected through semi-structured interviews with the people, households in these settlements, water collection methods, daily water use activities, their experiences, issues related to water availability, impact of rainwater harvesting tanks on their water demand, and demographic data of households. Now, these questions were all linked to the research questions and objectives. And this map on the right shows the settlements which were visited in the red spots, and you can see Taj Mahal is located here with river going behind, which is not visible in the map. Stage 3 is the preliminary findings from pilot study. This preliminary findings were done under 3 broad headings. First is the present infrastructure and sources of water as identified by the interview participants. It included these tanks, as you can see in the picture. They draw groundwater, and some of them had piped connections to around 10 to 12 households, while others they fill buckets from the tanks, as can be seen on the photo on the top right. Then there are private vendors. The picture on top, bottom right. There are these private vendors who sell these filtered water bottles called RO water bottles. In some settlements, CURE has implemented rainwater harvesting tanks, which can be seen on top left picture. These are actually underground tanks built in community buildings, and the surrounding households, I think about 80 to 100 households, they use water from these rainwater harvesting tanks as per their requirement. Then second point was the everyday water use activities. It was seen that people generally use groundwater and municipal water for cleaning, washing, bathing, and for their pets, whereas RO water was used for drinking and cooking purposes. Some people use rainwater for drinking too. Then I started making this diagram to illustrate water collection activities at community level on the outer circle, which is like a 24-hour clock. And the inner circle is for households, which is representing the water related activities at different times of the day. This was only done for one settlement during the pilot study, so it needs to be developed further based on the information that I'm collecting for the remaining field work. And third was the access, quality, and quantity. According to interview participants, access to water was not an issue as majority of the people have acquired piped connections from community tanks. This was facilitated by the local political leaders. Second, people did not complain about quantity either, as according to them, groundwater is available 24 hours. Everyone complained about the quality of water as it is affecting their health. Based on these findings, I mean, there was a lot more, but the time is limited today. So this one settlement, which is called Basai Khud at the bottom, this was selected for an in-depth study because all types of water sources, as identified earlier, are present here, and all these water sources are in different parts of the settlement, serving different groups. Right now, I'm at a stage where I finished my data collection only last week. Following slides show how I have started reducing the data using Excel spreadsheets. I've started by linking my questions from the questionnaire with the research questions and started generating some bar graphs and pie charts to show what are the number of people using different sources of water, and for what activities, who fetches the water, the time taken to fetch water. These bar charts are showing like water activities using different sources of water. I mean, these are all still in process. And our contribution this research will have is in providing data on daily water use activities of households in informal settlements. The extent of implementation of sustainable practices will also be known, and this information can be useful in water policies of future. Barriers and enablers associated with sustainable water practices will be identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Indrajit. So see you in